Hello everyone, welcome to HIM 216. This is your fifth lecture for Chapter 8. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to look at the abbreviations and acronyms at the beginning of the chapter, and also to review the chapter glossary terms that are on page 164 in your textbook. We're going to begin on page 150, and these are root operations that remove solids, fluids, and gases from the body. So I want you to go back and look at page 98, and towards the bottom of the page you'll see these three root operations: drainage, extirpation, fragmentation, that we are going to be going over in this lecture. In your book on the top of page 151, it tells you that a drainage procedure lets out gas or fluid from a body part, and some examples of these are incision and drainage procedures. And if I were you, I would be putting these on note cards, these procedures on note cards. An incision and drainage is coded to a drainage. In the index you look up drainage. A thoracentesis is a drainage. A spinal tap is a drainage. Sometimes drainages are diagnostic, and they're taking that fluid, such as when they do a spinal tap. They send that fluid to pathology, and they're looking for maybe bacteria or viruses in that fluid. A thoracentesis, that fluid can be sent to pathology. Usually, sometimes when a patient has cancer and they develop fluid in their pleural area, it's usually malignant, and so they're sending that fluid in to be analyzed. But there could be times that procedures are done for therapeutic reasons and not diagnostic, as in the case of a paracentesis. That's when the patient builds up fluid in the abdomen. It's usually because of liver failure, and in that instances they know what the cause is. They're just removing the fluid for patient comfort, and so that becomes therapeutic. It is not diagnostic. Let's look at also, there can be times when a drainage device is left in, but it typically it's not they're usually not permanent. At some point in time those drainage devices are removed, but we do have a qualifier to reflect that the drainage device was left in. So let's look at this first example. This is a lumbar puncture, and I would write these codes down on a note card because these are codes that you're going to see come back up. And for instance, when you think lumbar puncture, let's put in puncture in the index, and you can tell it that it says C drainage. But if we put in lumbar, there is no term for that. You have to know that this is drainage of the spinal canal, 009U, and this is percutaneous. They use a needle for this procedure. They typically do not leave a drainage device in, and if it's diagnostic, then we choose the qualifier of diagnostic. So for this example, 009U3ZX. And so that's how we got to that code. Now let's look for the thoracentesis. So if I go to thoracentesis in the index, it tells me see drainage anatomic region, 0W9. When I go to that, I have to be able to choose the body part. So I have to know that a thoracentesis is actually drainage of the pleural cavity, and in this example it's the right pleural cavity. So if you don't know what you maybe on your note card want to write yourself a note that a thoracentesis is drainage of the pleural cavity. And this approach is percutaneous. There's no device documented here, and there is no qualifier. We don't know that it was diagnostic. So that's our code, 0W993ZZ. And then in this third example on page 151, percutaneous insertion of a right chest tube. So they are putting in a chest tube. This is still a drainage. In the index, so if you go into insertion, it really doesn't send you anywhere. You have to understand that when they put in a chest tube, that their goal is to drain the pleural cavity. So we would go to the root operation of drainage. And then again, they put this in on the right. So it is, pleural right, and it's percutaneous. They did put in a drainage device, and there is no qualifier. So our code is 0B. No, that's not what I want. What did I pick here? Hold on. Pleural cavity, excuse me. So pleural cavity right. And this is going to be percutaneous, and we put in a drainage device, and there's no qualifier. So 0W9930Z. Now, the next root operation that we're looking at is extirpation. And extirpation is when they take out a solid matter from a body part. You will seldom, if ever, I have never seen a physician actually use the term extirpation, but it's a root operation, and as a coder, you are expected to be able to review the documentation in that chart and appropriately assign the root operation for extirpation. Now, solid matter can actually be abnormal byproduct of the body, such as a kidney stone or a blood clot or a buildup of the endometrium in the uterus. It can be a foreign body that's embedded in a body part, or of the lumen of a tubular body part. So that means the inside of a body part, like a clot. So if we look at this example, ERCP. Now I want to show you something here, because in the index, if you put in ERCP, it is taking you to the radiological procedure, to the fluoroscopy. That's not what we're coding. We're not coding the radiological procedure. We're coding the medical surgical procedure. So if you put in ERCP, you're going to get the wrong code. You have to recognize that when we are removing this stone from the common bile duct, it's extirpation. That's the root operation. So if I put in extirpation and then duct, I can't put in common. There's no, let's see if I put in bile. Nope, I have to put in duct. And then I can find the common bile duct, 0FC9. And the approach here is via a natural or artificial opening endoscopic, and you need to research an ERCP to see how that procedure is performed. And if you don't know, if I were just got to the screen and the only thing I have to put in is the approach, and I really don't know what the approach is for an ERCP, you need to research the procedure. You need to go out to PubMed or WebMD and take a look at that procedure and see how they describe that procedure being done. Of course, if you had an operative note, which you normally would, then you would know that. So this code is 0FC98ZZ. Now on page 152, fragmentation. Now, fragmentation is when we break solid matter in a body part. And the classic example of this is kidney stones. Lithotripsy is a procedure that's been around for a long time, and what they do is they use shock waves to break up that stone into small pieces, and then the body just eliminates it. Now, if the material is removed or taken out, then it's coded to extirpation only. It's not, we don't even code the fragmentation if in fact an extirpation follows that. But I am going to if we go to ESWL, extracorporeal shock wave lithotripsy, it tells us to see fragmentation. And so in this example that we have, it's fragmentation of a left kidney stone. So we can go to fragmentation, kidney, and left in the index. And the approach for fragmentation is percutaneous, because this tells us it was a percutaneous nephrostomy. So we know it's going to be percutaneous. And then there is no device and no qualifier. Now, your question for this lecture in exercise 8.2 on page 153, I want you to do question number 1 and question number 3. So exercise 8.2 on page 153, question 1 and question 3. And for this lithotripsy of the stone of the right ureter, that approach is external. For lithotripsy, unless it tells you that it's percutaneous, it's typically always external. Now we're going to look at some additional examples of these coding these root operations. So we're going to try looking at the incision and drainage of a perianal abscess. Now you'll remember that we said for incision and drainage that our root operation is drainage. And you have a guideline that tells you for the term peri that means close to the anus, and so our body part here is going to be anus. So in the index we're going to look up drainage, anus, and this is an external abscess, so our approach is going to be external, and there is no device and there is no qualifier. So if we come back to the table and choose drainage and anus, it takes us right to the table. We can choose external, and there's no device and there's no qualifier. This was not documented as being diagnostic. It was just an incision and drainage. So that's our code, 0D9QXZZ. Okay, so now we're doing an open right hip arthrotomy with a drain placement. So we're making an incision into the hip joint to put in a drain. So this root operation is going to be drainage. Oops. So we're going to be doing drainage, joint, hip. We're leaving in a drain, so our device will be a drain. We don't know necessarily, approach is open, so we don't actually know that this is diagnostic. So drainage, and I would write this down because anytime it talks about a hip or a knee or a shoulder, think joint. So I can go to drainage, joint, hip, and this was the right hip. So this takes us to table 0S99. We know that our approach was open. We know that we put in a drainage device and that there was no qualifier. So our code is 0S9900Z. Now let's look at a diagnostic percutaneous paracentesis for ascites. So in this instance, we're performing paracentesis, but we really don't know why the patient has paracentesis. So our root operation is going to be drainage again. In the index, we're going to look up drainage. Our approach is percutaneous. It is diagnostic. This is going to code to an anatomic site. Our body part's going to be anatomic site. So let's go back to the table and take a look at this. Let's look up paracentesis. So if we look up paracentesis, we can see peritoneal cavity, and it tells us to see drainage of peritoneal cavity. So when we go to peritoneal cavity, we can choose our approach, which is percutaneous. There is no device. We didn't put in a device, and we do know that it's diagnostic. So our code will be 0W9G3ZX. Now we have a foreign body in the left nostril, and we're using forceps to remove it. How is this different from the previous example? Gosh, did I miss an example? No, I didn't. So ignore that. So what's our root operation here? Well, our root operation is we are removing a foreign body. So when we look at our possible root operations, it's extirpation, taking out a solid matter. What is our approach? Well, because we can get into the nose from the outside, it's external. So let's go back and look at the table. So we know we're doing extirpation because we're removing a foreign body. And I'm going to put in nose. Okay, so there's nose, 09CK. So we're going to go to that table. We don't have nostril. We don't have left nostril. The guidelines tell us to get as close as we can, so we're going to choose nose. Okay, our approach is external, and there's no device and no qualifier. 09CKXZZ. Now, I'm going to tell you that for some of these procedures, they are not procedures that we would code typically for an inpatient. But they give you good practice, and they take you through the different root operations. Okay, so now we're doing a foreign body removal of the skin of the right index finger. So again, we're taking out a foreign body, so our root operation is going to be extirpation. The body part is going to be skin of the finger, and we'll have to get as close as we can. We may have to code skin of hand, and the approach is actually going to be external. There's no device and there's no qualifier. So let's see what we can do over here. So extirpation. Okay, and it's the skin. You got to remember, students always have a hard time thinking about the skin as a body part. So we know that it's this skin, and let's see if we can't do finger. I'm just going to Nope, finger is not here, but we have hand. That's as low as we can get. I mean, that's as close as we can get, and it's the right index finger, so we're going to have to choose right hand, and of course it just pops the entire code in for us. It's external, there's no device and no qualifier. So 0HCFXZZ. Okay, so now we're doing lithotripsy of the bilateral ureters. So we know that if there's not a code for bilateral, then we're going to have to code the right and the left. And we're doing lithotripsy, and we know that this is fragmentation, and our body part is the ureters. And this approach is actually external. That's typically how lithotripsy is done. So let's go over here and look. And I'm going to put in fragmentation, ureter, and you can see we don't have a bilateral code. So we're going to have to code both of these. So we know that this approach is external. There's no device and no qualifier. So for the left ureter, 0TF, 7XZZ. And for the right ureter, 0TF, 6XZZ. Okay. Okay, percutaneous thrombectomy of the left radial artery. So what are we doing here? What is a thrombus? A thrombus is a clot. So this is a clot in the left radial artery, so that's in the arm. What is our approach here? Our approach here is percutaneous. Our body part is the artery. So let's go see if we can find the code for this. So we know that we're doing extirpation, and we're doing it of an artery, and it's the radial artery, and it's the left radial artery. So when we get to this table, we have to choose our approach, and the example was percutaneous. And it was not at the bifurcation, so there's no qualifier. So our code is 03CC3ZZ. Now that's going to conclude this lecture covering the root operations that involve removing solids or fluids from the body part. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.